This account comes directly from the witness herself, describing something that happened when she was 13 years old, walking home through familiar woods behind her family's home in rural Georgia. The following narration stays as close as possible to her original words. Nothing has been added. Nothing has been dramatized. This is her experience.
I'm now 33 years old. At the time that I encountered this creature, I was 13. I will write it as it happened. My family and I lived in a rural community on the outskirts of Riverdale, Georgia. Behind our house there was many acres of woods. At that time, that area belonged to a man named Mr. Jackson. There was a huge lake there also. It was called Jackson's Lake. Mr. Jackson was a cattle farmer. His cattle were on the other side of the lake. There were many trails in those woods, and me and my friend Daniel played in them many, many times. It was very easy to lose yourself out there all day. My encounter happened when I walked through these woods to a trailer park that was called Chateau Manor. The trailer park still exists today, but is under a different name. I went to visit a friend. I started to notice that it was getting late, and my father had told me that he did not want me in those woods after dark. This struck me and Mother as strange, because we would always be in the woods. My mom would even go in those woods to pick blackberries. At any rate, I decided to obey my father, as I did not want to hear his mouth. I walked to the back of the trailer park, and there you have to cross a big ravine. It is like 10 to 15 feet down and then up again. It was all covered in vegetation and that Georgia red clay. Down in the ravine was a creek, so you would get a little scuffed up. After I crossed that, I went up a trail that went uphill by the lake and that curved around and led to my house. After passing the lake and turning the curve, I encountered my father. He said, "What are you doing out here?" I said I was just coming back from Pam's house. He said, "Well, hurry up and get home." I left him standing there and started for home. I turned back to see what he was doing, and he was walking toward the lake. I just kept walking toward my house. When on my right side I heard rustling in the foliage beside me. The foliage was mostly dense, tall pine trees with all kinds of honeysuckles and blackberry vines and muscadine vines. That was the place where Mom and I would come to pick blackberries. I turned and looked, and I saw this creature. This thing was massive. I could see him. He was only a few feet away from me. He stood parallel to me. I was heading north to my house. He too was face north. I was on a heavily walked clear trail, whereas he was in the shrubs. These little pine trees were taller than him. He was at least 7 to 8 feet tall. His arms were huge, like the size of thighs. They were very long. His chest was massive as well. This was no skinny creature. The creature's hair was about 3 to 4 inches long and a glowing auburn, reddish-brown, almost orange color. The face was darker brown, almost black, in color. The eyes were dark, the nose was wide, and the lips were not thick, with the upper lip being very wrinkled. I looked at him. He looked at me, and off how I went, running up the trail. I was so scared. When I started to run, he did too. He ran right beside me in the shrubs. I would look to my right and see him, and the thing would make a loud sound. It's like he would exhale and let out a very deep grunt. I kept running, and he kept running beside me in the shrubs. This thing was completely hairy, and its face was dark, but I could tell it was human-like because its head was like that of a human head, but hair all over, but not on the face. When I had reached the part of the trail that forked off into an open field of tall grass or wheat-like stuff, that is where he stopped. He would not come out of the shrubbery. I looked back and had seen him crouched there staring at me as I ran, and he just was there in the shrubbery. When I made it home, I ran in the house shaking like a leaf, and my mom was making supper. I told her what had happened and what I had seen. She looked out the dining room window and said she didn't see anything. She asked where my father was, and I told her. Then she sat down with me at the dining room table and told me that was the reason that he did not want me in those woods. She said that he had told her that he had hemmed it up in a tree one night and that he just stood there in front of it and screamed at it and it wouldn't come out of the tree. I never told anyone other than my mother and Daniel, and now my 4 boys about that. But there was something in those woods, and me and my father weren't the only ones that knew it. One day I was watching TV after school. This was before any of this happened, and my father came in and told me to come and help him. I said, "Why?" Me and my father do not get along very well. He said because Benji, our dog, had got caught in a bear trap on the other side of the lake. I said, "What?" He said yes. So we went and tried to free Benji, and my father had took a machete. He said he could not open the trap, so he was going to cut his foot off. I said no. So I pulled the trap with all my might, and my father got Benji out. Now, why had someone set a bear trap in the woods? There are no bears in this part of Georgia. The biggest animal besides that thing I had seen were deer and cows, and the cows were on the other side of the lake. They could not come across one side because of trees and the other side because of a big steel fence. And other times before I had ever encountered this being, my family and I would go walking in the woods, and sometimes we would cross the steel gate over to Mr. Jackson's land and trek about a mile to a very sandy, clear creek. That was the side where the cows were. On many different occasions, we would come upon a cow laying on the ground deceased with its whole stomach torn out. That was very weird to me, but because I was young and didn't know much, and since my parents didn't say much, I never put 2 and 2 together until my later 20s. There was something in those woods, but it's probably long gone by now. There are houses all around that lake, and Mr. Jackson no longer lives in his house. The creek where these things happened is called Camp Creek. I will never forget when that creature chased me. But when I got to that opening, I knew that he didn't want to hurt me. Because I know by his massive size and that massive sound that he could have just ripped me apart had he wanted to. Needless to say that I didn't go in the woods much after that. You are the first people that I have ever told besides my mom and my friend and my kids.
What makes this case particularly compelling is the witness herself. This wasn't a child making up stories for attention. When she finally reported this encounter years later, she was over 30 years old, a grown woman with nothing to gain from fabricating such a story. The details remained vivid and consistent, suggesting the profound impact this experience had on her life. The psychological trauma of this encounter was evident in how it changed her behavior permanently. A girl who had previously enjoyed exploring the woods with her family became afraid to venture into those areas, especially as darkness approached. Her father's warnings, which had seemed excessive before the encounter, now made perfect sense. He had known something dangerous lived in those woods, something that posed a real threat to his family's safety. This raises fascinating questions about what local residents might know, but rarely discuss openly. How many other people in Clayton County had their own encounters or experiences that made them avoid certain areas? How many unexplained incidents or missing pets could be connected to whatever creature inhabited those woods? The bear trap in a forest far beyond the range of bears is a solid clue that someone else had seen something here. The timing of this encounter is also significant. 1984 was an era before widespread internet communication and social media. Information about cryptid sightings was largely confined to local communities and specialized research groups. There was no viral video culture or online forums encouraging people to fabricate stories for attention. When someone talked about a Bigfoot encounter in the 1980s, they were often subjecting themselves to ridicule and skepticism with little potential for fame or financial gain. All of this to say that the girl would likely have had little to no exposure to information about Bigfoot at the time, and even when this was reported over 20 years ago when she was 33, Bigfoot was not as popular a subject as it is today. The location details add another layer of authenticity to this account. Clayton County's geography, with its mix of suburban development, wooded areas, cattle farms, and water sources, creates an environment that could theoretically support a large, omnivorous creature. The proximity to Lake Spivey and other water bodies provides the resources necessary for such an animal to survive, while remaining largely hidden from human observation. What's particularly chilling about this encounter is how it demonstrates that these creatures, whatever they are, exist much closer to human civilization than we typically imagine. This wasn't a remote mountain wilderness or isolated forest. This was suburban Atlanta, where thousands of people live, work, and raise families, completely unaware of what might be watching them from the tree line. The physical description provided by the witness matches patterns reported in Bigfoot encounters across North America. The massive size, hair covering the entire body, disproportionately long arms, and powerful build are consistent elements in thousands of similar reports. But it's the behavioral details that make this account particularly valuable to researchers. The creature's decision to stop pursuing at the clearing suggests territorial boundaries or strategic thinking that goes beyond simple animal instinct. This wasn't a random aggressive encounter, but a calculated response from an intelligent being acting with intent, perhaps defending its territory or resources. It could even have been an adolescent Bigfoot playing around, as these intelligent beings have been reported to have a taste for mischief and games in the woods. However, we can only speculate about the Bigfoot's motives that led up to this encounter. She herself noted that such a creature being so large and powerful could clearly have done worse than terrify a young girl into leaving the forest, a forest where she had explored alone many times before without incident. It did seem interested in her leaving, but why? Did there happen to be a whole family group too close by, perhaps with young that required extra protection? Or did the beings wish for space to conduct hunting activities? Some folks who see Bigfoot as guardians of the forest are adamant that sometimes Bigfoot run human beings out of the forest for their own good. People ranging from hardcore cryptozoology enthusiasts to tribal members with oral history on these and other creatures have been known to say that there are worse things than Bigfoot in the forest. If this idea is applicable here, the strange livestock losses could have a range of explanations beyond natural causes, known animals, or Bigfoot itself, and in that case the motive of the creature for loudly escorting the girl to the edge of the forest, and no farther, could have even been protective in nature. We can imagine, but we cannot know the whole picture. Beyond the facts of this story lies a wild universe of speculation. In this account, the witness describes a large, unknown figure that matched her pace, stayed within cover, and stopped at the edge of an open field. She does not claim to know its intent. She only describes its behavior, its appearance, and the moment she realized it could have harmed her, but did not. Whatever this was, the details matter. As the years passed, this encounter continued to influence the witness's life choices and her family's behavior around those woods. The fear was real and lasting, not the kind of temporary fright that comes from imagination or misunderstanding. This suggests an encounter with something genuinely threatening and outside normal human experience. Today, as suburban expansion continues to encroach on wild spaces throughout Georgia and the Southeast, encounters like this one become increasingly important for understanding how these creatures adapt to changing environments. If Bigfoot-type creatures do exist, it is possible that they are being forced into closer contact with human populations as their traditional habitats shrink. The odd cattle losses mentioned in this account point to another potential aspect of unknown creatures' impact on rural communities. Farmers and ranchers throughout the Southeast have long dealt with mysterious livestock losses that don't fit typical predator patterns. When these incidents coincide with creature sightings, they create a compelling case for taking these encounters seriously. What happened to that 13-year-old girl in Clayton County represents more than just another Bigfoot story. It's a window into a hidden reality that exists parallel to our suburban lives, a reminder that the natural world still holds mysteries that science hasn't fully explained or acknowledged. The next time you're walking through the woods near your neighborhood, especially as darkness approaches, remember this story. Remember that a father's stern warnings to stay away from certain areas might be based on knowledge that goes beyond typical parental caution. And remember that sometimes the most extraordinary encounters happen not in remote wilderness areas, but right in our own backyards, where the line between civilization and the unknown becomes terrifyingly thin. This encounter in Clayton County proves that some mysteries refuse to stay hidden in remote mountains and distant forests. They follow us home, appearing at the edges of our communities, reminding us that the world is far stranger than we dare to imagine. Thank you for listening to this field note and for approaching it with care.